Hello, yes, a good morning, a good afternoon, and a good evening to you, however you may be listening and wherever you may be listening. This is the latest edition of the Borden Sports Media NFL podcast coming to you during the second week of what has been a frantic free agency period. In fact, so frantic that I was basically worried to record a podcast last week because I didn't know exactly how fast things were going to be moving and I didn't want to miss out on any big news, especially during that first couple of days. So I decided to put it off a little bit. And then I decided I'd wait just another day or two to record, just in case we heard what was going on with Aaron Rodgers and whether or not we get a decision on where he was going. And as you know, in fact, that's going to be the first topic, just to give you a little bit of a spoiler. He has not made a decision, so I just kept holding off, and then scheduling problems and whatever meant that I couldn't record last week. So basically, blame Aaron Rodgers for the fact that you didn't get a podcast last week, and instead you are getting it this week. So I'll just get that apology out of the way. But as I say, just send all complaints to him for him taking this long over his decision on where he wants to play. But before we get on with the actual show, I do want to start with doing what I do at the start of every show, and that's the admin, which is as simple as thanking you very much for listening. And don't forget, if you're new, you can like and subscribe and follow on whatever podcast platform it is that you are listening to this on. And don't forget, you can also reach out to us on our social medias. We are at Baldwin Sports Media on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, and we are at MRB Sports Media on Twitter. So don't forget to reach out to us on there. And if you are a returning listener, then as always, thank you very much for your continued support and your continued listenership. Right, and with that being said, I suppose it's time we kick off with the show. And as I hinted at, we are going to be starting with the situation surrounding Aaron Rodgers and his free agency, and quite honestly, the absolute mess that he has seemingly turned this into, as he likes to turn everything into. I don't know why I expected it to change or hoped that maybe this would be, maybe this would be the one thing that would change. However, it looks as if, yeah, it looks as if this is going to be drawn out for another couple of weeks. So may as well talk about it now and then jump on it when he does decide to make a decision. But as you know, he got released by the New York Jets. Then all the talk came around surrounding, and it looked as if, for the most part, it was going to be either the Pittsburgh Steelers or the New York Giants were where he was going to go. There may have been some other talk elsewhere, but realistically, it was going to be those two. There was then seemingly interest or at least talk about the Minnesota Vikings, which whenever the rumors or the reports came around surrounding the Vikings, I immediately just dismissed as someone wanting to make the story happen that it's Brett Favre 2.0. He goes from he goes from the Packers, then he goes to the Jets, then he goes to the Vikings. So I never really took them seriously. Now you're sort of hearing reports that it's not really going to be the Minnesota Vikings. So we are in effect back to where we were a couple of days ago, and it is the Pittsburgh Steelers and the New York Giants. But even then, it's if you were to ask anyone on the street or even ask most executives, it would lean more towards the Pittsburgh Steelers. But the overarching point of the whole thing is that he says, or the reports are coming out that he's basically willing to take his time, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are apparently fine with it. Now, I've got to say, speaking as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, this whole thing does frustrate me that not just the fact that this is now going to be our however many quarterback in however many years since Ben Roethlisberger has left, and we for some reason can't seem to get the quarterback situation right. After Ben Roethlisberger, it looks like it was going to be Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett was going to sit. Then Kenny Pickett started and seemed to do quite well. Then we went back to Mitch Trubisky when Kenny Pickett got injured, and then Mitch Trubisky wasn't doing well, so we went to Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph did well, but we still let him go, and we kept Kenny Pickett. And then we got Russell Wilson. Then we got the whole thing has just been an absolute cluster mess. And now you're adding someone like Aaron Rodgers into the fold, and this circus that he's making himself, that he's turned this into. It doesn't sit right to me. And again, if you've listened to me on the show, you know that I've been very, very critical of Aaron Rodgers, both on the field and off the field, the past couple of years. And now to see the Pittsburgh Steelers are, in the leader in the clubhouse, as it were, for Aaron Rodgers. The Giants, according to the various reports, Jordan Schultz from Fox Sports basically saying that it is still down to the Steelers and the Giants rather. the Giants remain interested, though his reports. He reports that I could see them adding a backup type very soon, similar to the Pittsburgh Steelers adding Mason Rudolph. Whatever way it's going to go, but you still can't discount the Giants. But either way, it looks as if it's the Steelers are the leads in the clubhouse, as it were. The fact that we're in this situation and effectively giving into, again, according to this report, we are giving into Aaron Rodgers' demands of whether or not he wants to go. Sources have indicated that the Pittsburgh Steelers are fine waiting for Rodgers to make a decision on whether he's ultimately playing in 2025. The fact that we seem to be okay with that, especially given, I can't remember who it was about a couple of years ago that was saying, the Pittsburgh Steelers, we want volunteers, not hostages. Now, effectively, we are the ones being held hostage by Aaron Rodgers. Again, it just doesn't. If this was another player, if this was someone worth holding on for, if this was Tom Brady in the same situation, during that whole time between New England and Tampa Bay, if that was the situation, fine. I can wait. I can wait for Tom Brady. He's worth. The gamble is worth it for Tom Brady. Even if you looked at it this, if you looked at this offseason, there would be some that would make the argument that Sam Darnold would be worth the gamble if you got to sign him. You may lose a couple of weeks, but it'd be worth the risk. I just do not see it with Aaron Rodgers, and honestly, the fact that we have gone and re-signed Mason Rudolph, I'm happy sticking with him. Like if we have to completely change course and make Mason Rudolph the starter, and then that means drafting someone, be it a first rounder, I don't necessarily agree with it, but if it's a first rounder and then let him sit and develop and what have you, then so be it. If it's a third rounder, then again, so be it. It needs to be done. But either way, the fact that Aaron Rodgers is holding, I say this as a Steelers fan, but technically if you're a Giants fan as well, it's the same sort of thing. You may be one of those people that, again, I can't imagine there being many, but still wants Aaron Rodgers on the team. If you're a New York Giants fan that wants Aaron Rodgers on the team, maybe you're okay with this. But I just can't imagine that the vast majority of fans of both the Steelers and the Giants, whilst they are trying to sort out their quarterback situation, are happy with Aaron Rodgers holding their team to ransom over whether or not he's going to play over the course of this season. And it's again sort of an indicator that, maybe his time with the New York Jets and maybe it had humbled him, say. And the fact that, after the way he worked in this past off season, and then it didn't quite go so well for him, maybe this would be the time to, one last shot, I'm going to be a grown-up about it. But he's not being a grown-up about it. He's still taking his time and, as I say, holding his teams to ransom. And, the fact that, the news has come out today that, according to reports, Aaron Rodgers basically isn't getting any interest from media companies either. With front office sports claiming that basically, a source within the industry says he could be a great analyst, but he's insufferable and he needs an image rehab. The fact that, TV companies are willing to take a pass on him kind of shows you that, again, people are just done with Aaron Rodgers as a person. So that's just one side. Again, I still don't think he's a great player. Never mind a great person. Again, this isn't about like political views or whatever, but just the way he acts and has gone about the past couple of off seasons. That's just not how it's done and how I'd want it to be done. So Aaron Rodgers, honestly, again, the fact that he's doing this should be the biggest indicator. When he said, if he told the teams that he needs to take a while to take, that should have been it. Like, Cam Hayward said it perfectly. Either you want to be a Steeler or you don't. And the fact that he's hesitating at this, like, does he really want to be a Steeler? He clearly doesn't. Otherwise, he'd have jumped at the opportunity. Again, I know the Steelers aren't the be-all and end-all franchise in the league, but there's still an element of the name value that you want to add to it, and want to be someone to add to it. So if you're not doing that with the Steelers, and to an extent the New York Giants as well, if you're not doing that, then what are you really doing here? So that's the latest on Aaron Rodgers, and that's my latest thoughts on Aaron Rodgers. Though I don't think they've really particularly changed over the past couple of months, because I'm still not the biggest fan of him, either as a off the field or on the field. Right, so that's the first topic out of the way. The second topic surrounds the rules and the proposed changes to the rules. I don't know if it's the league owners' meetings yet. I know that's set to be coming up in a couple of weeks down in Florida, but or if it's the competition. I don't know exactly what the title is of everything that's going on Now, or maybe this is in preparation for the owners' meetings, but news coming out today of proposed rule changes that usually come about this time of year, and this is basically the basics of it. I'm just going to go through, see what's come out today, and just give you my quick thoughts on them. So let's see, what do we have first? So the Detroit Lions have proposed eliminating automatic first downs on defensive holding and illegal contact. So this will be the situation where it's third and 13, say, and the player commits a defensive hold, which is 5 yard penalty. So but instead of being 3rd and 8, it goes to automatic. The 5 yards is attached, and then it's an automatic first down. So this would basically get rid of the automatic first down. I'm personally in favor of that. I do think it is dumb that you've got those small penalties that could reset that can reset the set of downs. Again, no problem if it's 3rd and 4 and you commit a 5 yard penalty, you get the down and the yards that way. No issue with that. But if it's one of these cheap plays where something like that happens, I do tend to agree. I think that does need to change. So Detroit, good one on there. The Green Bay Packers have officially been the one. There probably are a couple of others that have proposed similar, but their name is on the thing. The Green Bay Packers have proposed to ban the tush push. I've given my thoughts on that. I don't think you can necessarily ban it. Again, if there was evidence to suggest that it was a vehemently more dangerous play, you can make the argument, but just for a football play, no, I don't think you can ban it. But the Green Bay Packers have the wording of the proposal, at least this is what's been put out by the NFL football operations on Twitter today, to prohibit an offensive player from pushing a teammate who is lined up directly behind the snapper and received the snap immediately at the snap. So basically, if you can't push the player that's directly under the center, effectively. Again, there's bound to be there still will be some way around this, but just as an idea, I can't get around banning it personally. Again, if there was safety involved, go for it. But right now, as a play, just learn to stop it. Let's see. The Philadelphia Eagles have proposed a change to the overtime situation where it's going to align more to the overtime situation in the postseason rather. So rather than 10 minutes, it will go to 15 minutes, and both teams will have the opportunity to possess the ball regardless of the outcome of the first possession, and so on and so forth. Again, I kind of agree with that. I do think it's weird that you would have different overtime rules for the regular season, the postseason. You've got to keep it the same. Personally, and this is a quiet one, I'd just get rid of overtime in the regular season. Personally, I've said before, I put this on Twitter. It is like an unpopular opinion thing. I go to the way you do it in rugby, where it's done by points rather than records. So it's 4 points for a win, 1 point for a tie. You eliminate overtime, 0 for a loss, and then you get the bonus points depending on how many touchdowns you score or if you lose by within a certain margin. I would go by that route personally, but in terms of aligning the postseason, the regular season, overtime, if you're going to go that way, fine, I'm okay with that. It makes a lot of sense to me. Now, there have also been a couple of bylaw proposal, which I don't know exactly what the different definition is, but this has been proposed by the Detroit Lions again. They are proposing to amend the current playoff seeding format to allow wildcard teams to be seeded higher than division champions if the wildcard team has a better regular season record. So this is the situation where, like in this previous postseason, the Vikings came in, even though they were, far better record. They were 1 win away from getting the 1 seed, far better record than the Los Angeles Rams. They still had to go on the road and play. And again, it wasn't necessarily on the road because they had to play that game in Arizona because of the fires. But the principle being, they still had to make a road trip. Again, I'm personally in favor of that. I think it comes back to, I believe I've talked about this. If a team has a losing record, I think they should still get into the playoffs, even if they win the division with a losing record. They still get in, but I don't think they should be given the necessary advantage that a division winner would get in that situation. This is just an extension of that. Personally, I'm fine with that. So I'm happy with that. I think that's a very good idea. Again, there should be an element of, not necessarily redressing the whole thing. So in that situation, the Vikings would have been, would have necessarily. It's not necessarily then done by order, but in that situation, the Vikings would have had the home field. I get it. The Lions did also propose something to do with roster selection, which to exclude from the 90-player limit a player placed on reserve slash injured reserve before or on the day of the roster reduction to 53 players. It's basically a roster thing. My head's still not smart enough to understand exactly what the wording is or what the benefit of that would be. However, what I would say is I still don't get the idea of 53 rosters, a 53-man roster, and then you still have to give the ineligible, the ineligible players. I think honestly, if you have a squad, just have them all available for game day. If I'm being brutally honest, that would be the proposal I would want to see. Stuff this certain amount of players are inactive, and then you get some that are quote unquote healthy scratches. Just 53-man roster, and then whoever's available on game day is available on game day. I even personally would just, again, there's probably a financial aspect to it as well. I'd get rid of the practice squad. Just bring them in as well. Just have, a bit like they do on college sidelines, where you have like 90 players. Just have all 90 players available, ready to go. There will be the third string quarterback that's still going to be sat there rather than have to be sat on the side. Although obviously with the third quarterback rule now, that's not a thing. But you get the idea. The fifth string corner, say, he still won't be playing regularly. But if the game's a blowout, rather than trotting out the second string cornerback, try out the fifth string. Then you never know, you might be able to find some gem there. So I just have the whole lot there. So the regular 53-hour roster and the practice squad, just get rid of that. That would be my change to that. So those are the proposed rule changes. As I say, I'm in favor of some of them. I'm not in favor of the others, but it will be very, very interesting to see exactly what goes on in the coming weeks when this is going to be proposed officially at the league owners meeting. Right, and with that, we come on to our third segment of the show, which is where I usually do a wraparound of what the big news is, or just wrap around the league and try and touch on some of the topics that have caught my eye. If I'm being honest, when I initially wanted to sit down and do this, I was thinking of just going team by team, all 32 teams, as giving like a one good move they've made, one bad move they've made. Just in free agency, but I figure that would probably take too long. So I'll just go with with some of the news that has, with some of the bigger news. Again, this is no disrespect to, I've got the list of players here. So this is no disrespect to the New York Jets signing Byron Cowart, for instance. But I can't go through everything and just give my thoughts on everything. So I'll just again just pick a few of the bigger ones, and I suppose we best start again in the AFC North with the Cincinnati Bengals finally getting deals done with Jamar Chase and T Higgins, both of whom agreed to long-term big money contracts. And as I said on TikTok the other day, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with the contracts they got. Jamar Chase got 4 years, 161 million with 112 guaranteed, whereas Higgins got a 4 year, $115 million that is guaranteed for the first 2 years. Not saying they didn't deserve that. They are both incredible wide receivers. As a 1-2 punch, you can make the argument they're the best 1-2 punch in the league. What I don't agree with, though, is the fact that this has now worked out that 44% of the Cincinnati Bengals salary cap is going to 3 players. That is Joe Burrow, Chase, and Higgins. I just think, and I've said this before, if you pay that much and have that much concentrated within just a few players, you're gonna have to be very, very lucky to avoid injury for those three players. You got to hope that someone that is cheap turns out to be an absolute star, and you better win the Super Bowl. Otherwise, you are going to look back and regret all of it and think, could I have shaved 10 million there and 10 million there and given that 20 million to somebody else? I just think it is a very, very risky game. Again, not saying that the Bengals can't do it. Again, that offense, when it's humming, one of the best in the league. But it is a very, very risky game. Now they do have to go all out. You look at the teams in their own division. The Ravens going and signing Sammy Watkins. What a great offensive weapon. Again, one of the best offenses in the league with the Baltimore Ravens. How great is that? Within the conference, the Kansas City Chiefs. What are they going to be able to do? in a track meet if they can really sort themselves out, and if Tyreek Hill decides to stick around, then the Miami Dolphins on a in a shootout could go and match the Bengals. But it has to result in a Super Bowl, or it's all going to be pointless, and it's all going to be left with you wondering whether or not you should have done that. So that's just my thought. That's the Bengals deciding to give their deals to, again, greatly deserved, not taking anything away from either of them, but just a little bit risky if I am being very, very brutally honest. Moving across to the NFC, and I think the best bit of I think honestly the best bit of business that any um best singular bit of business, let me put it that way, best singular bit of business that any NFC team has done was the Washington Commanders going to get Larry Tunsil. I think that is an absolutely brilliant move, helping to protect Jaden Daniels, which is always going to be, your main concern with the rookie quarterback is protecting him, making sure you don't get this speaking about Washington, get a Robert Griffin III situation, and then giving him weapons. I think signing someone like Larry Tunsil again for the price they got him for as well, absolute steal. So brilliant job by the Washington Commanders there. Talking about weapons as well, I've talked about it before, but get Deebo Samuel, again, brilliant move, I think. But if I were to just nail it down to one, getting Larry Tunsil, I think, is absolutely superb. In a joint bit of business, the Chicago Bears getting Jonah Jackson and Joe Tooney, I think, again, absolutely sensational bit of business. And again, just putting a thing of, right, if you now have everything you need for Caleb Williams, you've got him protected. That was always what everyone said. He could do a lot of, but you just need to protect it. You've got it. Now let's see what you can do. So I think very good bit of business there by the Chicago Bears. And then just to wrap up, we'll touch on some of the quarterback moves that have gone around the league. Sam Darnold to Seattle. I'll admit I was a bit stunned to see that one go down. I thought he was going to stay with Minnesota, but good luck to him there, especially after they moved away from Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. Again, it'll be interesting to see what happens with them there. Los Angeles Rams keeping Matthew Stafford again. I thought he'd be prime. I thought he'd be prime trade fodder if I'm being honest and being sneaky honest. Take whatever cap hit. I would have taken him with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, I like Mason Rudolph. I like what he can offer. But if the choice is Mason Rudolph, Matthew Stafford, Russell Wilson, and Aaron Rodgers, there's a clear winner in that situation. So good on them for managing to keep hold of Matthew Stafford, sticking in the NFC West and move out of the NFC West. Geno Smith to the Las Vegas Raiders. I absolutely love that move. The fact that he now gets reunited with Pete Carroll and gets in some way, I know he's got his ownership job and his punt and his analyst job. I'm sure there will be some words said from Tom Brady to Geno Smith. So you'd have to think that's a very good move and possibly not necessarily a revolution, but again, continuing of the revolution, the renaissance of Geno Smith as a quarterback. So a very good move on that end. And finally, wrapping it back to the AFC, Justin Fields to the New York Jets. I'll admit I was somewhat saddened to see him leave. I thought he had potential, and I wouldn't have been sad if we'd stuck with him. But that is the way it is. Good to see him. I think the New York Jets is a team that I think he'll be able to do very well with, especially if the defense is able to offer the same level of production that they have been the past couple of years. Got some good weapons, not great. The room and personnel has changed a little bit and could be changing even more. But I think that's a really good spot for him to go and hopefully resurrect his career, or continue his resurrection of his career rather. Right, and now we come to the fun segment, and we are approaching baseball season, so I'm going to go with two baseball stories. The first of which, and I mentioned this, I think it would have been probably around this time last year, but the Savannah Bananas are continuing their revolution of baseball and trying to make baseball fun, selling out Raymond James Stadium, selling out a football stadium. Again, baseball stadium is one thing. They're about roughly half the size of NFL stadiums. To then go and sell out an NFL stadium and continue to take their style of baseball all the way around, all the way around America. Absolutely brilliant move. Love it. Can't get enough of it, and I really wish I got tickets for when they come to Pittsburgh in August. Wasn't lucky enough in the initial round of lottery, but hopefully I can get something. Maybe I'll be able to scalp one. I really do want to see what banana baseball is. And the second, and this is something that comes around every single year, when ballparks try to reinvent their food menu. And some of the offerings this year have been somewhat weird, somewhat wacky. They always are. The one thing that I've seen a couple of teams do, and I'm assuming if these are trial runs, they are going to extend to all the other teams, but refillable baseball bats for popcorn. And I'm assuming there'll be other snacks as well. I doubt it'd be something like M&Ms. That'd be far too expensive. But something like popcorn, I could see do. But the fact you get like a big, again, refillable bat for popcorn. I heard someone talk about on the radio this morning in Pittsburgh, one of the local channels. That is a parent's nightmare, I'm telling you right now. Because not only will the kid want it for the popcorn, because kids will want to eat things at games, but you can just imagine what an absolute menace that thing is going to be in the car ride on the way home, or maybe even in the stadium. So if you are going to a baseball game this year and your kid, or even if you do, I won't blame you. If you want one of those refillable popcorn baseball bat, just be very, very careful because it can cause some problems, and I'm sure we will hear stories of exactly that happening this season. But with that, we've come to the end of the show, and yeah, it's been a pretty busy one, pretty eventful one. I am going to move this. I just want to make a program. Again, with this being the off season and with it being not as big, juicy, whatever in terms of news now that's quietened down. I am going to be moving this to fortnightly. So I'm not going to be so similar to last. No, I gave a week off last week, but that was for the reasons I explained earlier. I'm going to be missing next week and then record, and then it's going to be fortnightly just to make it a little bit easier, just so we're not diluting the product somewhat, just scraping for some form of topic to talk about. So we'll be moving fortnightly, but don't forget that in the meanwhile, if you're missing out or if you're missing, what's the phrase? You feel like you're missing out. You're pining for. Let's go. Probably not that dramatic, but if you're pining for more content, then don't forget to go and follow us on our social media, which are once again at Bolden Sports Media on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, and on Twitter we are at MRB Sports Media. So give us a like, follow, and subscribe on those platforms. So that is it. I want to thank you very much for listening. If you are new or if you are a returning listener, and as always, well, not as always, because I always say see you next week. But I won't see you next week, as I explained. So see you in a fortnight. But as always, take care and stay safe.